Welcome back to Destin Talks to Random People. Joining me this time is Skillup.
Hello.
How's it going?
Good, man. I think this is the first conversation we've had, question mark, is it?
We've talked online. I think we've met at events, but I don't think we haven't done this show.
I don't think we've met at an event. I'm pretty sure we haven't.
I feel like I know you. Is it just because I watch YouTube all the time?
Because just like, we know everyone in this space now. We all watch each other's shit. So yeah, we've definitely chatted online, but never actually face to face. So it's good to finally do that after all these many years.
Yeah, it's good to see you and call you out for calling me out about Suicide Squad. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just joking.
That didn't even happen.
I know. I'm creating a fake beef. Like
that's what everyone else created. Everyone else said that I was like having a dig at IGN's preview, and I didn't. And in fact, in my recent show, I defended your preview because I'm like, that's I'm sure we'll get into that, but no, that's not what happened at all. And I watched your preview, and well, look, anyway, I don't want to jump ahead. I'm sure we'll get into all that.
Yeah. Well, today. Well, let's start. Let's pretend people don't know who you are.
Sure.
Why don't you tell people a little bit about what you do? You have a very successful YouTube channel, but beyond that, maybe you could tell us a little bit more.
Yeah. So, my name's Ralph, aka Skillup, and been doing YouTube for this is the 7th year now. Started out covering The Division back when that had just arrived. It was popping off, and I think
that's how we met.
Was it?
It has to be The Division. It has to be The Division.
Yeah. Really? Okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Doing your guides and all that sort of stuff. I did this weekly news show, the weekly vendor reset thing where every week in The Division, the vendors would reset and I would go around to all of the vendors and talk about what loot they have. And then I would make a video on that. And I swear to God, that's how I got my start on YouTube, just making those videos. But then, pivoted into some other looter shooters like Destiny and Warframe, and then eventually started reviewing games. And that's what I've been doing ever since. And yeah, I mean, in the last few years as well, actually, there's a new show that I've added to the channel. It's called This Week in Video Games. And it's just, pretty standard news show. But I like it. It's fun. And yeah, it's good to be able to cover this industry because I really love playing games, but I also really love the industry that makes the games. And certainly some of my most fulfilling piece of content that I've ever made is when I've been able to speak to developers about what they're doing, So that's me, man. That's me in a nutshell.
That's cool. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I definitely remember following your stuff when you were covering The Division. I got super into Division 2.
Sure.
Most people, people might recognize me because I did Destiny for a long time. I had a Destiny show on IGN, which started with Jose Otero and eventually would become mine because I kept playing and people sort of fell off in the OG days.
That was the Fireside chat, the Fire Team
chat. And most people say Fireside chat.
Yes, of course.
Make that correlation.
But,
I think that's
that had a great run. That was many years, and it was very watched, and it was definitely in the conversation a lot. And I mean, you guys had guests as well, and right, you had Bungie people on occasion. Yeah,
Paris on, Bungie people were on. We did the IGN first back in the day, and
of course,
yeah, lots of people on that show.
What do you think about Joe heading off?
Yeah.
Just anyone doesn't know, the creative director for Destiny 2 is Joe Blackburn, and he's just announced he's leaving after the final shape. That'll be his last drop.
They announced that I believe it's Tyson is taking over. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah, I
Tyson
saw that.
Green, yep.
I just saw that today. Everybody who worked on Destiny 2 moved on to Marathon. So about the time that I ended the show, they were all moving on to Marathon, all the senior staff members.
Really? Is that true?
Yeah, Scott moved over there. Christopher Barrett moved over to Marathon. I know that, yeah. And I'm like, wow, these are all the people I would interview about Destiny content back when I was doing it. I don't know about Luke Smith. Luke Smith got promoted and he's working on other things now. But Joe was great to work with, to talk with. He was always very open and transparent, willing to talk to you. And it is very clear that he cared about the game in the same way that the community, I think, cares about the game, So I just think it's unfortunate what's been going on at Bungie with the layoffs. Sure. They had layoffs. The senior leaders at the company are saying we have the right people here now. And it's just that's really crappy to say about your former
shitty
colleagues,
language,
So yeah, I think it's unfortunate that he's leaving. It's if it's his choice, it's his choice. And I'm sure Tyson will do great, but I can tell you that I stopped doing Fireteam chat because I got kind of tired of the grind. It was like the fourth or fifth season of Unlock the Squares, and I just couldn't do it anymore. What are do you still follow Destiny?
Yeah, well, also I'll just say I'm getting some echo, by the way. I'm not sure if that is going to get worked out in post, or I just wanted to raise it in case it's a problem.
You might want to mute the tab on the vMix call.
Got it. Okay, yeah, cool. Got it.
That should eliminate it.
Okay, cool. Back to your question: am I playing Destiny right now? No, but I think part of me is similar to what you've said, which is that like I'm a little bit like over Destiny. You know, like it hasn't evolved a great deal in. I mean, that model was really set down with what? Which expansion? It was. I don't know. Beyond Light was that like? No, I think the seasons sort of coalesced after that, if I'm not mistaken, because
Beyond Light was the kickoff to the new model, and then they just didn't change anything.
Correct. And I mean, to be fair, they have had a lot of seasons, and they've had a lot of expansions since then, and there's been a lot added to the game. It has expanded, but I think that the core of it has not evolved enough. And it's interesting because, like, you look at something like World of Warcraft, and it's like, well, that hasn't evolved a great deal over time. Like, of course it has, for sure. Don't get me wrong. I used to play WoW. I played WoW for 10 years, and I definitely watched its evolution. But I would say the core of it is still quite intact. And, you know, there's a character sheet, and you get the items, and you do the raids, and do whatever. Like, there are new experiences being bolted onto that, but it's still quite similar. Destiny, I think, has had its own sort of version of that evolution over the years. But it's hit a point now where it's really just like, I think we're going to need something else. Like, this is not quite enough, you know? And so I have stepped back. I'm playing other games right now. I definitely plan to return for Final Shape, for sure. Are you planning on playing Final Shape?
Yeah, actually,
yeah.
I mean, my goal is to play through all the content before Final Shape hits, because I'm still back, and I started playing through it already. I started playing through the Drifter season where they all went underwater. Which was a while ago, because you can do that. You can still play through all the old story beats. And it's really bad to play old content because they got rid of matchmaking. You have to like search for it now. And like the new structure is really bad for any player that's lapsed like myself. So it's not super inviting. And that's going to make it harder to play through that content. They say people aren't supposed to upload compilations anymore to YouTube, so like you can't really go just watch and get a recap of that.
They said that? When did they say that? I didn't remember saying that.
It was a thing in a TWAB. They said, don't do compilations anymore. And I specifically asked about it, and they said, yeah, don't do that. So I'm like, and
don't upload compilations of cutscenes onto YouTube anymore.
Yep. And my YouTube channel, one of the videos that ended up getting a bunch of views was Red War. When they announced they were content vaulting all the stuff, I did meticulous capture of every spoken story moment for all the Destiny seasons through one of the late ones. I think Lightfall was where I stopped, because that's the time when they started saying, well, they were purchased by Sony. So I don't know if it's a Sony thing, because they're trying to like, you know, expand their storytelling abilities. And they've done their own compilations that are like 3 minutes recaps of those seasons.
Sure, I've seen those, yeah.
But I'm like, you're throwing away like an hour of story content. And some people can say it's filler or whatever, but like I was a comic collector growing up. So for me, doing those compilations was sort of like collecting all of the comics, so to speak, in a series. And
yeah, I really agree with that. I mean, I think as when the whole like content vaulting thing came along, I was like cautiously supportive. I'm like, all right, you've told us that you need to do this to maintain your workflow, so we keep getting new stuff and the game can keep improving. And it's like, I think that kind of sucks, but all right, I'm willing to go along with it, right? But I think now, like, having looked back on that journey and what we've lost over the years and what that means for the industry as well as a template, I'm like, nah, I'm not on board with that. I'm really not. Like, I think the trade-offs are not there. I don't think Destiny is a substantially better game as a result of this decision. And I think it sets a bad precedent for the rest of the industry. And yeah, I'm pretty firmly against content vaulting at this point. I think it's very bad for video games. So yeah, I've definitely evolved in my thinking on that.
Fast forward to today, and like we didn't really have a show plan or anything, and the only thing that's been on my mind has been Suicide Squad for the last few days.
Sure.
Where are you at with your experience with that game?
So I'm just about to do the final boss encounter.
Okay, so
I just
Brainiac.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know how we're going to handle spoilers in this, but yes, Brainiac is the bad guy, and I'm just about to fight Brainiac, essentially. So I've taken my time with it. I'm at about 15-ish hours, I think, because I've been doing side content as I went. And I've been, playing all characters and switching between them and trying to level them up a little bit and whatever. So yeah, just about to roll credits.
We'll go full spoilers at the end of the show, but for right now, I'm just curious to hear your overall impressions of the game. I think everybody knows, if they follow me on Twitter, that I've been being a little baby about the game. So what are your thoughts though? Because you were a little more positive from when the alpha NDA lifted.
I was really trying to be optimistic. I was trying to see the bright side, because I think there is some bright side to be had, and clearly it's resonating out there with some people. You see some of the discourse and people think it's fun and they like the combat and they're like, yeah, this is cool, and they like what's happening with the story. They love the presentation, which I think is objectively excellent. And I don't think anyone can say that this isn't at the absolute cutting edge of visual presentation. Some of the facial capture stuff is just industry leading. I haven't seen stuff that good since Guardians of the Galaxy.
I actually want to hone in on that with you, because I agree in some respects, and in others, I think it's a little bit of a step backwards for the engine. So character models, absolutely agree. They look absolutely stunning. The facial animation looks great. Voice acting, excellent. And that's all the stuff I said in my preview, right? There's some great jokes. There's some really bad jokes. There's like poop and pee stuff that I'm just like, what?
As an Australian, I can confirm there are multiple bad Australian-related jokes. Yeah. Yes.
But then there's the general design of the open world, which I find, like, the Daily Planet is something that I've seen people talk about online. That's really cool. There's a lot of cool stuff you can find in the Daily Planet. The museums, I interacted with every single thing in the museums. I love all that world building stuff. But then when you pull back and you just look at Metropolis and what it looks like design wise, I think it's a step backward. I think the open world looks like a visual downgrade. And there's videos out there now where people are looking at Arkham Knight and comparing that visually to what this game looks like, and it's drastically lowered. So I'm sorry to hear your thoughts on in that respect, because all the other stuff I agree, positive, but like the world is there's nothing going on in it.
Well, I don't think there was much going on in Gotham, as in there were no people in Gotham. There were like plenty of goons running around, but it wasn't like there was traffic or anything else. And it was a very outdoor city. It wasn't like you could go into many of the buildings. I think, and I'm not a game maker, but my understanding is when you're running a game 4-player co-op and people can go anywhere they like on a map, that requires a very different approach to how you build a level and how much visual fidelity you're able to put in there. That's my understanding. I could be wrong about that. I'm not struck by a level of visual downgrade between the two of them in terms of technical performance, but I definitely agree that Gotham has a much starker artistic presence about it, unmistakably so. Like Gotham feels bigger, and I think it is actually bigger, because I think one of the defining aspects of Metropolis, it's really small. You can just get from one end to the other in no time at all. But I think the major issue that I have with the open world is more about the fact that it feels like you're on a single map the entire time. And even when you do happen to visit different landmarks, it doesn't feel like they're actually different landmarks. It feels like the whole thing is just one contiguous space that's just rooftops and buildings, and that's it. Because you actually never need to contend with space. Like in Batman, you had to be on the ground and you had to like drive the streets and you had to really think about what it meant to move through these buildings in this space. And but here you don't, because every rooftop is the same. It's all just a rooftop that you jump on, And so I think, there is less visual identity to it for sure. But I think the major issue with that world design is it just feels like you're on one really small, repetitive map that has no presence in the playing of it more than anything else.
Yeah. And when you, like, I don't really land on the ground. There's not a ton of reason to go down there. And the game actually encourages you to not land on the ground. All the traversal mechanics are about staying in the air. And when you do go down there, it's like, oh, this is like somewhat interesting. I have no reason to be down here. There's no enemies here. There's no mission here. But all right, so you jump back up in the air, and I think that's a bit of a problem. I don't mean to go off on a tangent on that, but I see a lot of praise for the visual aspects of it, and I'm like, I think they're talking about the character models, the cutscene presentation, visually. Anyway, we can get into the story stuff later. Yeah. So I just wanted to clarify, because like when you look at the world, I think it's like reduced a little bit, potentially because of the reasons you outlined.
Yes, yeah, but I would, just to clarify what I was saying, I definitely don't think it's a technical issue. Like, I think those graphical presentations that we're seeing, I don't know, I don't really buy into that as much. I'm really just more talking about art design.
Yes, okay.
So yeah. But yeah, I mean, outside of that, there's not much I like about this game. There really isn't, and I really had hoped that there would be. You know, I'd really hoped in my preview, I'm like, okay, look, if there's 15 to 20 hours of this and it's got some great story and some interest, and some of the missions become more interesting in the future, and maybe some of the abilities open up and some of the itemization blossoms, like if all of those things happen, then yeah, cool, like that could be great. But on every front that I've experienced over my 15 or so hours, none of that has happened. It's just the mission design is atrociously bad. I think the story stuff is horribly mismanaged. The loot game is so non-existent during the campaign. And I think many people would say, well, it shouldn't be. It's all about the end game. It's like, well, not always, man. Go and play Outriders, for example. That's a fantastic example of a game that understands how to... I actually didn't play Remnant, but I heard the same thing. There are ways to make loot matter early on, and... this is not it. Also, I'm looking at, because I'm about to enter the end game, and I'm so terrified of that, because I'm looking at the way that items are built in this game, and it's just like they have like 6 different fucking things that you need to read through, and it's just like, oh god. I mean, I played Diablo. I've played every single looter shooter. You know what I mean? And so I'm used to fairly complicated descriptions for how an item augments your build style, but it just seems like every single item I pick up has these things that I need to like read through and pass and like try and make sense of. I'm like, what the fuck is that? And what is that? None of it naturally seems to flow from a play style. And maybe that understanding comes later as I refine a build and I get into the end game, and I'm like, oh, well, now I understand why that connects with that and exactly what that does. But I'm just looking at so many things. Sorry, I'm just hanging up this phone. I'm just looking at so many of those things, and they don't pop off, and they're not things that I'm excited to experiment with, you know? They're things that I think, oh, that's kind of annoying to, like, for example, Shield Harvest, right?
Oh my God. That's what I talked about in my preview. And I'm like, this is so annoying.
It's terrible. It's like, shoot their legs. Okay. First of all, when you're playing with a controller, which is what this game recommends on PC, by the way, when you boot up this game on PC, it literally says you should plug in a controller. You're like, well, all right, I don't usually do that, but let's do it. And then there's a lot of lock auto aim that kicks in whenever you hit a target. That auto aim goes to their chest. That's what happens when you lock onto an enemy. And then you need to manually press it down to their legs. And these enemies are all like really top heavy. Like they've got these big torsos and these tiny little chicken legs. And you got to shoot them and then hope that your gun doesn't one-shot their legs. Because sometimes you've got a shotgun or whatever that can just pop off and boom. And then after that, you're like, oh, has it? Are they shield harvestable now because they've been knocked down? And they get up and like, nope, they're not harvestable. Oh, okay. I guess I'll shoot them again. And they're like, oh no, that didn't work. And then, oh god, I hate that mechanic so much. And I know there are other ways to harvest shields later on. I'm seeing that in the talent trees. I'm seeing that in the itemization. But I really have genuinely hated that mechanic a lot during this playthrough.
There's also
and that's just one example of how I think everything is just very complicated. Because I don't think I think my thesis with this is this. I don't think they managed to figure out how to make the core gameplay interesting and deep in and of itself, full of like a mechanical richness that you can kind of lean into. I think instead they're reliant upon all these other things that kick in on the stat sheets and the modifiers and whatever else to try and spice up the gameplay and add additional stuff to it and add all these extra whatever. And so I just think it's very convoluted to really like play this game. It feels very convoluted to play this game. And it's so noisily, like visual noise. Oh my God. Sometimes you just can't see what's fucking happening. There's just so much shit on screen. Yeah. And that's not just the UI meme, which did the rounds and whatever. It's legitimately like you've got your shield warning around you. You just can't see, you know? And sure, that doesn't happen all the time, but it happens enough.
You can turn off the menus though, so it's okay.
Say again?
You can turn off some of the menus.
Okay, well, I mean, I always review games on the basis of how they've been put to me by the developers with the default settings, because I think, well, that's what you've intended. Most players aren't going to change that, so that's how I review it. And yeah, the visual noise is truly out of control. So anyway, I've been rambling. So I apologize,
just so people know, I had no idea what your impression was of the game before this conversation. This was just going to be, let's have Skill Up on. Like, I've been meaning to have you on the show for a while. I asked you about like a year ago, and finally, got around to doing this thing. And so like I didn't ask you any leading questions or anything, but I'm agreeing with everything that you're saying. And I reflect a lot on my preview. I'm like, what did I fail to do with my footage that didn't make my point well enough? And I'm like, okay, so I hit people talk about the plant, and I'm like, I'm trying to showcase the knockback mechanic, which just was happening to me a lot. And it's on a lot of the geometry in the world. Like there's a turret. If you touch the turrets, you just get...
I know that. Why is that necessary? Like, why is it necessary that if I touch a turret, I get knocked over? Like, is that a necessary thing we need to add into this loop? Why? Do you know what I mean? I don't get it.
Yeah, I should have used that as a visual representation. But anyway, seeing people come to the same conclusion I did from the preview, it's a little refreshing, honestly. I'm curious, do you think this is going to like put a stop to the games as a service chase? I feel like Anthem has failed. Suicide Squad is looking, let's say it's gonna land in the okay range for some people, or like there's only like 8 reviews on Metacritic right now, so I don't really know where it's going to land. It's in the 60s right now. I feel like VGC gave it a 4, so it is resonating with some people. 4 out of 5 stars. So it is resonating.
Did they actually play the end game though in that review? I don't think they did.
I don't know. I have, and I played the 3 missions that you have to do after the campaign. I unlocked all of the character missions, which are just bad. Like they're so bad. The Lex Luthor missions, for example, it's like, okay, go do these Lex Luthor missions. You can only damage enemies through encounters. So you're sitting there waiting
through counters. Yes. Oh my God.
You're just sitting there like an idiot, waiting for them the counter indicator to come up, and then you counter them, and then you wait again. And like, there's so many missions like that. The story missions with the escorts. I stood on top of the ice cream truck for that one escort mission, and I'm just, please spawn something so I can play the game. Okay, here's 3 enemies. Stand on top of the truck again for 5 minutes while we give you exposition. It's like this. It's a jerkiness to everything about the game that I just can't get past. Right. And I'm playing the end game. I'm like, I want to find that thing that everybody is loving.
Yeah.
Like the people who are positive about it, I'm like, I want to find that. And I can't,
I personally can't. Like as I said, I really had that preview, the alpha that I played. I was like, I could see how this could be cool if you could add more enemy types, and if you could, the flow of combat could become more interesting through abilities or something. I don't know, like just mission types. If there were more interesting mission types, I mean, even like, and I'm not at the end game, so I don't know if this happens later, but like dungeon style encounters is a really good example of something that to this point, this game just doesn't have. I'm not sure if that exists at the end game. I don't know. Have you encountered anything like this?
So here's what I've just unlocked where you can do like the super hard stuff. So
sure.
And I was curious, like, is difficulty, like if I turn up the difficulty to the hardest, there's like walk in a park, and then the next,
I've seen
the
those,
next one. And then once you do all 3 of the, I think there's incursions and invasions. I've done all the things to unlock to be invaded or something a few times. I don't even know what's going on.
Right.
But then I do this stuff where you go through the portal and you go do an objective, and then you escape from the portal, and then you do that 3 times, and you unlock mastery levels for Banner. Do you want to know what you do when you go in there?
Oh, yeah, I'm not worried about spoilers or whatever at this point, because
you protect Poison Ivy's plants, or you
I've seen some of that.
Collect the data things, then you turn them in, and then you finish it, and that's it. Then you get your drop. So I don't know if that's supposed to be like their version of a Destiny Strike, or their version like of it just feels like a Destiny public event, for lack of a better term. And I'm so confused. Like, what am I not doing right? And I've been watching, I can't remember who he is on Twitch, but this Twitch streamer who's like grinding the end game. And I watched him yesterday and I tuned back in today. He's doing the exact same thing still. And I'm just wondering, I'm like, I was hoping to see more variety, but it's all just more of the same.
Yeah, and I already know that people are going to be like, you guys play Destiny and it's so repetitive. And it's like, yeah, it is, sure. But like, at the end of the day, like there's a variety of activities in Destiny that just like cross a threshold where you're like, well, it's repetitive, sure, but there's enough here that it's varied enough. So you've got your open world activities, you've got your raids, which is a big deal. You've got your strikes, and there's quite a few of them at this point because it's built up over time. You obviously had PvP, which sort of, that's a whole other thing. There was Gambit, which is kind of on ice at the moment.
Yeah.
But you know, and there's also your weekly missions, and missions are a thing in Destiny, right? And it was the same with Division, where you have a mission. It's not just like walk around the open world and do some bullshit. Like there's a mission that's structured and it has beats and it has encounters and you walk into the next room and like all of that. And it's like, where is any of that here in this game? Like, why isn't there? Like the Batman experience is interesting, right? Because you basically walk around.
The museum.
So there's two Batman experiences. Yeah. Well, I don't want to spoil the boss stuff, so let's just talk about the first encounter with Batman with less of a spoiler. It's like, okay, you're in a dangerous place. You're in a museum, and the Bat is hunting you. Mm-hmm. But what are you doing? You're just walking around, and that's it. Like it's cool visually. Like it's a cool scenario. But imagine if that was actually some kind of like dungeon or like, you know, strike experience where there were multiple wings of the museum and you need to make your way through it, and Batman summons. Like, imagine if that was a thing that you fought your way through, and it's not. It's just that, and it sucks. It's very disappointing. So I can't quite see. I don't know how this works long term, man. I can't see it. I can't. Like, I'm not the end game yet, but everything I've heard and seen and understood about it, but even just the core of the game, I said that in my preview as well. I'm like, I think this might be a fun campaign, and I hope it is, but I still could never see how this exists as a live service. And now that I hear about what exists at the end game, and I've spent more time with the combat and what have you, I'm like, nah, I can't see that at all. There's just no way.
Yeah. I'm a little concerned about it. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if I'm sort of at that point where I'm like, why am I playing this? I'm just going to play through Dragon's Dogma is coming out in March. I want to play through the original. I haven't played the original for the first time, so I'm kind of at that point where I'm like, people want me to shut up on Twitter anyway. So
I get it.
Maybe I'll just play something else and move on. But the only reason I'm still playing is because I see that people are liking it, and I want to have that experience, and I'm just not getting it. Right.
Yeah.
I like the story has weird issues that I don't know. We don't have to talk about that, but like I have some weird issues with how they delivered the narrative, and like
totally.
There's a particular scene where there's two particular scenes actually that just don't make sense from a lore perspective. And yeah, let's just change off of this for a little bit, and we'll come back and we can maybe get spoiler free or into spoiler territory with this one. But one of your favorite features that I've talked with my colleagues about was your Steam Next Fest coverage. Your coverage inspired me to figure out how our coverage could be better.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
And I love your video. So what are you looking forward to from Steam Next Fest this year?
Oh, well, look, I won't lie. I mean, I'm always... The Next Fest stuff I've found is just this massive surprise of stuff that comes along. Like even today, I think Devolver just announced a new game, Children of the Sun. Did you see this one?
No, not yet.
No, okay. It's like it's basically like Super Hot, but you're a sniper instead, and you can kind of control the bullet as it goes from each target. There was this new survival game that was just revealed as well. That's offering a 40-hour demo, and it looks pretty cool. I'm trying to find the name of it now because I've downloaded it.
And if people are wondering, like one of the big games from the last one that I had played like 20 of the games, and one of the ones was Enshrouded.
Absolutely,
that game is so good. It got overshadowed a little bit by Pal World, but they had Enshrouded had 1 million players.
Yeah,
and I really that game got its hooks in me. I played for 40 hours.
Yeah, nice, fantastic.
Castle Grayskull, and like got super into it.
The building is really good because the way you can combine the materials with the thing, it's fantastic. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, when I mean, that's an example because I played that at the Steam Next Fest before, and I'm like, this is going to be huge. And so I reached out to the team like who's making it, and I'm like, guys, this is gonna be massive. I would love to have you on the podcast. And so actually, this coming week, the lead on that game is going to be on the Friends Per Second podcast. We're going to interview him about the success of the game, because as soon as you play it, you're like, this is fantastic. And I have some issues with it. I reviewed that as well in early access. I'm like, it's got a ways to go. I think some of its systems are quite sort of surface level, and they could do with some deepening. But as a product that's out in 1.0, like it's really pretty remarkable how much they packed into that. So, but yeah, the Steam Next Fest, I'm always just diving in, and that's the best way to approach a Next Fest, I think, because you genuinely have no idea what you're going to find. You just go to Steam's page. They have really great ranking tools now that highlight the most played stuff or the highest reviewed or whatever, so you can kind of trust that. But I've also found Reddit threads to be really useful, because there's people who are just playing shit and they're like, yo, this rules, and then it just gets upvoted, and I'm like, I'll check it out, and that's it. So the Next Fest stuff is really fantastic. Last year, didn't have as much time to cover it as I would have liked, because there were just so many massive AAA games soaking up time. But this year, and I just spoke to my team, we're definitely going to be covering Next Fest in detail this coming week, and we will have a video out on it highlighting all the best stuff. So it's a really fantastic thing that Valve do. It really is. It's just a shame that it's in February, because it's often overshadowed by big releases, because February is often full of big releases these days. So yeah, no, it's great. So you're going to be doing the coverage for IGN on that, or are you sort of?
We hired a freelancer, and he's going to help us, cover it. And yeah, so I'm more of I'm manage more than I do the work. So it's more about coordination and stuff. But yeah, we have that lined up. And I'll probably still be playing a bunch of them also, just because I like this. It's next week, right? It starts.
It is this coming week. It is this coming week. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep,
so go check out Skill Up stuff about Steam Next Fest, because it's just a really cool feature. I really liked how you handled it. I don't think IGN would make a 45-minute video, but
I mean, I don't know why not. Like it's if you guys farmed it out to a bunch of people and each had to cover 5 demos and combined it into a single script, I mean, yeah, and I think it's a great. I think personally, I think every outlet tries to cover indie games as best they can, because it's hard, right? When it is competing with bigger games that are of course going to attract more clicks and whatever else. But I personally try and cover that stuff as much as I can. I think it's important. And so I even every week in the news show, shout out an indie game and sort of like put this on your radar segment. The Next Fest stuff as often as I can. We have like an indie spotlight series, which we kicked off last year as well. We've covered 2 games, American Arcadia. And what was the other one now? God, that was last year. Feels like a million years ago. But yeah, TLDR. Oh, that was Jusant. That's right, which was fantastic. Yeah. So I think TLDR indies are really important, and I think covering them is it's good. It's good for the soul, I find, covering the indie stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I didn't write a ton of questions for you. Let's just keep talking about Suicide Squad. So spoiler warning now for anybody watching who wants to experience the game for themselves. I want to talk a little bit about some of the story stuff that I had an issue with. So I'm going into it starting with the Green Lantern, starting at this moment. So there's a scene after you kill the Green Lantern, and yes, you kill all the superheroes. And Shark puts on the ring. And apparently, do you know DC Comics?
Not well.
Apparently, you're not supposed to be able to do that. Apparently,
I guess that much.
Like, my first reaction was like, oh, they can just pick up the ring? Like, I was streaming it, so you can go watch the VOD on the channel, but I was like, you can just pick it up? The moment was cool, but the longer I sit with it, I'm like, wait a minute. That makes no sense from a lore perspective. There's a scene where Superman is stabbed in the heart with kryptonite, and they sort of explain it, but not really. But I'm like, how is he even walking if there's kryptonite around? So, those things, I guess you could retcon, but yeah. What were your thoughts on those?
I feel like the little, because I'm sensitive to communities and their concerns about law always. I get it. I do. I don't dismiss them outright. But I think the majority of people that play this game are not going to be super invested in the law, and they're like willing to hand wave away a lot of that stuff and be like, well, that's kind of dumb, but whatever. But bottom line, I think that the law, the handling of the law is the least of this game's problems when it comes to its narrative and its approach to storytelling. Like, it's just, I think the way that they kill the Justice League members really fucking sucks. I think the boss encounters are terrible. Like, they are so bad. And then the way...
Wait. On the boss encounters.
Yeah.
Most people seem to like the Flash fight more than I did. I think it's, out of all the boss fights, I think it's one of the better ones.
I agree with you. I agree with you. Because it's how would you describe it? He's running around, he's making the tornadoes, and I think that's less about that being a good fight, and it's about the other ones being really shit.
The Batman one especially is
oh my
trash.
God, the Batman
it is so freaking bad.
What is going? There's just no mechanics in that fight. There's just nothing going on. It's true. It's very. Oh God, yeah. I don't know what Rocksteady were doing with that, but
I did like Green Lantern. So just to be positive for a second,
I mean, it's like, okay, he run around and kill his constructs and then shoot him. I think, and this is the problem with this game being built in this way, around the need for everyone to be able to fire a sniper rifle or an SMG. If that's the main way you deal damage, then you got to make sure that you can shoot the Justice League to death. And that immediately feels really dumb. And you need to then solve that problem. You're like, well, the rest of the game is about shooting guns. How do we make the boss encounters feel really different? And I think you sort of said it in your preview, where you're like, there should be a moment where it's like, he's down, let's get him. And he's in a weakened state. Yeah. And it sort of happens with the counter thing. And you've got this MacGuffin that lets you do damage to him. It's explained in some really unsatisfying way, but it should be a deeper mechanic where there's something that you do that traps the Flash, or something that you do that, like, blocks out Green Lantern's abilities to conjure, his bullshit or whatever it is. It should be something. And then you're like, this is the moment. Let's do some damage here. And the Superman fight where he just flies around. God, that was annoying. That fight flies everywhere. Just fucking still. And I think as well, some of the shit that you got in that preview was like, oh, he said the Flash moves too fast. And it's like, okay, listen.
I never said that. I actually said it makes sense that he's fast.
Totally.
He's the Scarlet Speedster. But it's annoying as shit.
It's annoying. And it's the Superman fight is another example. It's like, of course it makes sense that Superman is fast and flies around everywhere. Yes, absolutely. Of course. But that doesn't make the fight any less annoying. It's just annoying to have to run around and, oh God, it pissed me off, that fight. So, yeah, but even then, I think as well, at the Superman fight, when that ends, there's not even a moment where Superman's like, oh no, I realize that I've done something. Like, there's nothing. He just dies and he's a corpse on the ground. They don't even look at him they barely look at him after that. It's like, what are you people doing? It's so unbelievably mismanaged, and it feels so anticlimactic. And as well, I think there would have been a way to do the Justice League members that weren't such, like, mustache twirling villains. Like, we're going to say the most evil shit ever.
You know what? There's a brief moment where they hint that they could have done that. When Wonder Woman gets the Flash and she's like, you have to kill us, Diana. There's no other way. And then he's just huge fucking piece of shit after that.
Absolutely.
Like we never get that glimpse back to Barry. And I'm like, that's the thing that you should have done with the heroes.
Totally agree.
It's so frustrating.
The fact that they're written that way means you can essentially disregard them. Like, they're like cardboard cutouts of these heroes. They're not the real heroes that are like that are struggling with the fact they're mind controlled, and you don't feel bad for killing them because they're not the real heroes. They're just, as I said, cardboard cutouts. They're ridiculous, and it's not interesting at all, So I think from a narrative perspective, it's just very disappointing. And I don't know. I don't know that you needed to have a game where you like, and I'm not that person that's like, oh, it's terrible that they kill the Justice League. I'm like, fine, okay, whatever. I'm not sensitive about that. You're not
clutching your pearls, right?
I'm not clutching my pearls because I don't care. It's like, if you could come up with an interesting way to kill the Justice League and make me feel something about that, I'm on board. But if you're just going to use them,
don't feel anything, and it's not interesting how you kill them.
Yeah, if you're just going to use them as little props that you just sort of put on the battlefield and then take off when you're done with them, like, that's not interesting. And you got to wonder, like, what if the purpose of this game was you play as a Suicide Squad and there's the Justice League, and they were trying to kind of maybe get in your, like, you had to do what the Justice League can't because they're very honorable or something, and there was and you maybe had to be the crew that are willing to slaughter some innocent people or whatever to save the world, and the Justice League aren't willing to do that, and they're trying to stop you while you're trying to get the job done. And that would be interesting. That would be cool. But just to do them like this is like, I don't know, man. It's very disappointing. And I think a lot of my hope for this game was predicated on a good story campaign that I could really be like, yeah, man, they did some cool stuff with that. But it absolutely did not deliver on that at all. So I'm very disappointed.
I literally pitched after my preview. I'm like, I desperately want to play this game and make a video said I was wrong about Suicide Squad. And the more I play it, the less I like it. You know,
yeah,
and it's that's not what I wanted to happen. You know? I didn't want to like write it. I don't want to go to a preview and write a negative preview.
No, of course.
Like nobody,
especially
nobody like, why would I want to do that?
Yeah. And I think as well, there's this, you know, I think look, because clearly, you know, a lot of people have it out for this game from the start. Okay. And, you know, a lot of people are like, it's live service garbage and it's so disappointing and it's, you know, wasting Rocksteady's potential. And that was the narrative from the beginning. And I'm like, and I always kept an open mind because I'm like, I'm not against live services. I'm like, I play quite a few of them, and if you can do it right, I'm down for it. You know what I mean? And if Rocksteady could have found a way to land it, I'd be like, well, more power to them. That's fantastic. But I think people really have it out for this game from the start, and I think now the reality is it's just not very good, or at least most people don't think it's good. I certainly don't. You don't. A bunch of other people don't. But I think there's this kind of sense of like, well, everyone's just farming negativity, and it's like, well, no, like it's no, like it's okay to say that this is not a game that you like. It's very okay to say that. I don't think it is, you know, a Redfall or Golem level disaster.
Yeah,
because it's much better put together than that, of course. But at a fundamental level, this game is meant to be something that is meant to continue for years, and it's meant to be Rocksteady's bedrock for the next chapter of their existence. And I just can't see how they've succeeded in that goal at all, you know. And from that perspective alone, I think it's a real shame that this is where their efforts went for 9 years or whatever it was, when I would have much rather them. I would have personally rather them make something else.
Yeah. I mean, if you go through the pillars, like gameplay, it's fine at best, you know.
Sure.
Repetitive story, I would say it's bad personally.
Yeah.
Like I don't think it's written well. I don't think a lot is explained very well. And I mean, I'll just leave it at that. But there are things to like the visual, the detail that was put into the character models, the expressions, the stuff I outlined at the beginning, right? The voice acting. I like those things a lot. So,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I think the caveat to all this is like, you know, people are like, well, it's about the end game. And it's like, we know that it's about the end game, by the way. Like, that obviously. We've played looter shooters our whole lives. Like, I know that, you know that. Like, everyone who plays looter shooters know that. And so it's possible that this game undergoes a radical transformation at the end game and it becomes really worthwhile. And that's the thing. And it's like, okay, I'm leaving room for that potential. But I think even with, you know, Destiny, for example, when it launched in vanilla and you're like, wow, this campaign fucking sucks. But you could still feel that it had this potential as a game because of its core gameplay and its loot design. And you're like, well, you can feel where this could go in the long term. I just don't have that feeling here for what this is. And happy to be proven wrong. Happy to see that it's actually way better at the end game and the campaign is just is whatever. But I can't see a path to that at this point.
Yeah.
No.
Well, I didn't mean for this to be a Suicide Squad episode of the show. We talked a little bit about Steam Next Fest. What else are you working on? Like, I know you do the Friends Per Second podcast, right?
Yes.
And what other products? Because I know you have your whole thing. I watch your stuff mainly, right? I don't really watch a ton of podcasts, but I know that's a very popular show. And I watch your This Week in Gaming. I've seen a few of those. Like the one where you talked about Suicide Squad.
Yes. I that's pretty much me. You know, I do reviews, and I also have someone else on the channel that does reviews. His name is Austin, and he used to be my editor, but now he is doing reviews on the channel. And he does really fantastic work. I'm always very proud to have his stuff on my channel. And so there's him. On the news front, we're kind of expanding, and we're working on some secret stuff in the background that we're not ready to talk about yet. But we do have a guy named Edmund Tran who's been brought on, and he's a veteran, many years in the industry, formerly of GameSpot and a publication called Games Hub. And he's now helping to put the news show together. So I still write it and voice it, but he helps with the news gathering and doing some original reporting for us. And we're going to scale that up as well over time. And yeah, the podcast was Frames Per Second. So it's myself and Lucy and Jake. We're very lucky to have some pretty good access to guests, and that's been a real highlight. Like last year we had Gabe Emantangelo from City Project Red. We had the Alan Wake 2 directors, both of them on the channel. We had a whole suite of guests that we were really proud to have on the show. And yeah, we've got some pretty cool ones lined up for this year as well. I can say that. Can't talk about them yet, but we got some big stuff coming. And that's everything, man. That means that I'm very busy as it is. Working across all of that at once is a lot. But yeah, that's me.
Last question. What are you looking forward to? Like, what's the next game that you're like, oh, I'm really hyped for that?
That's a good question. Death Stranding 2, after that fucking trailer. Oh my God. Holy shit. That was incredible. I just absolutely lost my shit in that. That was the coolest shit I've ever seen in my life. So, the guitar, like the whole thing though, because I'm a massive like Kojima stan, like unashamed, and I love Death Stranding 1 from the minute I played it. I was like, this is remarkable, and so to see him just cutting even more loose this time around is wild. Obviously, that's not till 2025. I mean, for me personally, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is obviously at the end of the month, and I'm very pumped for that. I never played Dragon's Dogma 1 either. So I'm actually looking forward to playing number 2. Rise of Ronin is definitely very high on my list.
Yeah, that looks good.
Yeah, and I think after that, actually Stalker 2, because I really love the Metro games, which obviously, different developer, what have you, but same vibe. And I think that's looking pretty remarkable. And yeah, so I don't think it's going to be as big a year as last year. I don't know how you feel about that. I think it's going to be.
We have that huge gap in the middle. Xbox has announced a lot of stuff like Stalker 2, Hellblade, Avowed.
How are you feeling about Avowed, by the way? Tell me about what you think about Avowed.
Well, I don't know if you saw my initial reaction to the reveal. I was like, what? Because I had just the visual aesthetic of that teaser trailer was much different. And it sort of set up expectations in a different way than the one that they actually showed.
I agree.
I'm worried about Avowed. I don't think it's going to be like a Redfall. I think it's going to be okay. I don't think it's going to be a disaster. I just think it's going to be okay. But if they nail the storytelling, because that's what that series is known for. I even just played like an hour or two of the first one. I was like, well, okay. There's some really, really interesting lore to dive into here.
Oh, like Pillars of Eternity, you played that? When you said the first one?
Yeah.
Yeah, you play Pillars. Okay, right. Cool.
Well, just for a few hours, just to see what's everybody hyped about for this game. So I was enjoying that. So they have a lot to build upon. And if they can nail the story and the gameplay is like, okay, I think they're in a better place with that franchise. And maybe we get a sequel, right? But I am sort of like cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, I think it's hard to say. I don't know. Like I say, it's going to be okay. I think it's too early to judge that. All I can say is that right now, it's not kind of like leaping out at me as being like, "Yo, this is going to be incredible. Look what they're doing with that and with that." And they're like, they spend a lot of time talking about the combat, and it was kind of just like, well, this doesn't look that exciting. I think it is. Obsidian games obviously live and die by storytelling, the decision-making frameworks, all that sort of stuff. Hard to show that in a trailer, of course, but. Yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic because what have Obsidian done lately? I mean, we've got Pentiment, which I didn't play, was meant to be fantastic. Yeah. Grounded, which was actually, I loved Grounded. It was awesome. And before that was The Outer Worlds, which I really enjoyed. A lot of people, I think, have cooled on it over time, but I really, really love that actually. So the track record is there, and I do have faith that they'll deliver. I think it'll be smaller in scale than what people are predicting.
Much.
Yeah. So as long as people go in with the right expectations and of like a 25-hour game as opposed to a 75-hour game, then I think, I hope that Obsidian will deliver.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you're right. I think there's this weird gap in the summer months where it's just kind of like, what are we going to be playing? Anything?
Yeah. Backlog, man. I've still got to get through the rest of Armored Core. There's lots of stuff from last year I wasn't able to tackle. So, But again, I'm kind of looking forward to a more relaxed year because last year was a lot.
Yeah.
And I definitely worked in a very unsustainable way last year, I think. And so I think I want to try and get my life together again after 2023. And a more constrained release schedule will definitely help on that front.
Well, Skill Up, people know where they can find you. Thank you for joining me. I always think the outro part is going to fall apart. So just a warning. This might be a total disaster. Thank you, Skill Up. Let's see if my stinger works. Thank you so much to the members for supporting the channel. Click the join button if you want to become a member, of course. You can go check out Skill Up stuff. I'll link to it using the annotation fancy thing on YouTube and in the description below. We're going to get out of here, and we will see you next time. Bye for now, everybody.